Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Labella Associates, dedicated to the pursuit of partnership for more than 40 years, offering services in the development of buildings, infrastructure, environmental, and energy projects. Labella, powered by partnership. LabellaPC.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made with the hiring of a new superintendent for the Rochester City School District. As we reported last month, the board chose Eric J. Rosser, who comes to Rochester after spending 5 years as the superintendent in Poughkeepsie. Rosser will be leaving Poughkeepsie City Schools to start in Rochester on July 1st. That's exactly a year after interim superintendent Demario Strickland stepped in Rochester, and following the resignation last year of Carmine Peluso, who left Rochester to take the head job in Churchville-Chili. The Rochester City School Board is hoping this hire will finally, at long last, bring stability to that position. But as we've reported, that vote was not unanimous. Rosser was selected by a vote of 4-2. One board member, the former board president, Cynthia Elliott, was not present and did not vote. And I want to be clear, we invite all board members to this program to talk about what's going on in the district, to talk about their views on hiring, on culture, on education. Two board members took us up on that first, and they were on this program about a month ago. Former board vice president Beatrice LeBron, as well as Commissioner Isaiah Santiago. And they were the ones who voted against this hire. They told us a month ago that the election of Donald Trump had placed school districts like Rochester into a state of crisis, with many students refusing to go to school out of fear that they will be apprehended by ICE and deported. LeBron said that the district needs to shift its focus entirely to dealing with Project 2025 and the new presidential administration. And she wanted the district to make the interim superintendent permanent. But of course, it didn't happen. The majority of the board decided it could handle all of those issues facing the district and hire a new superintendent. Meanwhile, the district was rocked by the death of by suicide of a student recently, and I'm sure listeners are familiar with that story. Mental health services are being stretched. So this is our continuing series of conversations with the members of the board, and the president of the board is joining us this hour. Camille Simmons is back with us. President Simmons, nice to have you back. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the superintendent, who I still have not met, but you have,
Yes.
of course.
Of course.
And you're feeling good about this hire.
Absolutely. Dr. Rosser is a phenomenal hire. As you stated, he comes from the Poughkeepsie School District, but that is not the only years of experience that he brings to the Rochester City School District. He has collectively about 24 years in leadership and has served in spaces like the Buffalo City School Districts, Atlanta, Washington, D.C. So he brings a plethora of knowledge, experience, and the level of experience that we think we need in this time.
Did you go into this process thinking we really do need an outside voice, or did you think, let's see how interim superintendent Strickland is doing, let's hear some inside voices? Did you have a mindset going in on what you wanted?
I think it's important, and having served in leadership and gone through several different hiring practices, either in the district or externally at other organizations, it's extremely, to me, important that I go in with an objective mind. So you may have an ideas around what you would like to see based on community feedback, based on experience that you've seen within the district, but it is imperative that you keep an objective mind, an open mind, and that way you can get the most viable candidate possible when you're going through this. If you close your mind to possibilities, you miss out on great opportunities.
Tell me about the advantages that you think this superintendent brings to this job.
Again, just even watching him come in, Dr. Rosser has started his transition plan. His official start date will be July 1. But even in his transition where he's come in, he's able to see structurally a lot of things and ask questions. And oftentimes I'm a person who believes that you don't have to have all the answers, that it's important that you ask the right questions. And so even his line of questioning and curiosity around how our district is structured, what's working, what's not working, lets me know that he is seeing exactly the way he needs to see. I feel confident that his experience, and he's not in a space where he's building his career. He's already done that. He's coming in, I believe, with a stable mindset and the fortitude to really drive systems change in the Rochester City School District. And like any superintendent, they're only as successful as their board allows for them to be. And so it's going to be extremely imperative that we function in a way that allows them to be successful.
I would think this is such a hard job. You have a situation where it's a district with a lot of poverty. It's a district that is, and we'll talk more about this, populated by some students who are fearful right now of what's going on, and we'll talk about that in a moment. It is a district that is trying to figure out, how do we prepare students for their future careers, whether they want to go to college or not. Are they going to be able to work? What is technology doing to the future of work? Are we engaged with that? Do you view him as an innovator? Do you view him as kind of a culture person? I mean, how do you contextualize his leadership?
Yeah, I think he's going to be able to set some foundational pieces in place. And even looking at his work in Poughkeepsie most recently, and the population is not comparable to Rochester, but he's served in areas. And for him to go, and the issues in Poughkeepsie actually mirror Rochester. But the other piece is being able to lay foundations and see the impact of those foundations is impressive. Also, for example, literacy is something that I'm very leaned in on. I think that literacy is the foundation for all education. If you can understand literacy in all of its plights, then you understand science. You can understand math, because literacy gives you that foundation. And for him to take the literacy rates and exceed the state progress in Poughkeepsie gives me a lot of happiness. I'm feeling very happy about that.
Given our conversations in the past, I'm not surprised that you in particular said, let me see those literacy rates.
Yeah.
And you like what you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that he can expand and scale. He has the skill to do that. And so when you're tried and true and you have examples and you can take a look at a person's resume and it shows you that progress, then it's something that you can lean into with comfort. I'm also excited that he'll be coming through the community, meeting folks. He was just here this past Saturday. I, unfortunately, was out of town for attending a school board conference. So I was able to talk with other school board members from national areas and just see how they're feeling about, you mentioned Project 2025, looking to see who has these answers that people think everyone should have, who has the answers. And really, it's scary. A lot of folks are trying to figure out how to move in this space. And you want to move in a way that is responsible and not alarmist. But you also want to move with a sense of urgency, but you have to move in fact. And things are coming in so many different directions. You have to, to certainly plan with it, collaborate, partner up, and get that information in front of, your school district.
So when it comes to reading, I want to ask you about a proposal from the governor and a conversation that's really kind of become a national conversation about what kids can do in terms of access to tech in schools. I was listening to a recent conversation, and I'm going to be reading Jonathan Haidt's newest book. I think it's called The Anxious Mind. Maybe you guys can fact check me on that. I think Jonathan Haidt's newest book is The Anxious Mind. He's a psychologist, and he's become this national figure who's advising governors, Republican and Democrats. And he's telling them students cannot concentrate. They are anxious. They are panicky. It is a lot driven by the culture in schools, where sometimes bullying is driven by tech and access to smartphones all day long and screens, and that's not been good for kids. And so, number one, he says we've got the least thriving generation of kids and young adults in 100 years. And number two, we should be banning cell phones in schools, bell to bell, as Governor Hochul is talking about. Not like, can't have them in class, you can have them in your locker. They're not coming in the door. You're not thinking about them all day. You're not obsessing during the class about what you're going to be texting in the hall during the break. Bell-to-bell ban. Do you support that? Do you want to see a bell-to-bell cell phone ban in schools?
I do want to see some kind of constraints on cell phones. I also want our students to feel safe and have access. And when we talk about anxious minds and the ability to reach your parent if you're not feeling okay, if that ability is not in front of you, that gets a little difficult.
But schools still have phones in the office, right?
They have phones. So we want to make sure that we create systems where children feel safe and they know where they have access to make those phone calls if necessary. And so I do think there needs to be some level of constraint, but we also need to consider how we can be innovative around technology. How can we leverage that to better support our students' learning, because we are talking about young people who are growing up in the face of technology, where we learned the computer. We were introduced to different levels. They are born in the generation of technology. That's all they know. And we're asking them to go back to this antiquated way because we're used to that. We know a time where technology did not rule the world. And we can think of, hey,
You and I are the bridge generation.
yeah, I'm dating myself, right? But we're the bridge generation.
That's right.
So we knew when the street lights came on, we knew that parents, different ways to reach our parents, how it was get on your bike and go see Tommy up the street. Now you can just text them or FaceTime them. What are you doing? So we know the day that existed before. And so we're asking young people to unpack that and imagine
And kind of
that.
go, but what if it's not antiquated? What if it's actually a better way for kids to be raised and for kids to live?
I think there's a balance. I can appreciate it. And I think it is disheartening when you see young people like their head down and they're in that phone and it's driving things. Even me as a mother, my son's 27 now, but just even when he was growing up, I recognize how technology was used. It could be used for good or evil, right? And so there are things that happen at the hands of technology. I think school systems can support ways to be innovative around technology. I think it's an and, Evan. I guess that's what I'm getting at. How to be innovative and use it in a responsible way. How arming them with education around the harms of it, but also how you can balance it. There are times where you might need to put those phones away. So.
Do you think a bell-to-bell ban is going too far?
We'd have to see how it works out, but not necessarily.
You're open to it.
I'm open to exploring it, but I need students to feel safe first and foremost, and I think that anything we do needs to be balanced.
Talking to the president of the Rochester City School Board, Camille Simmons. So let me just close the loop on a couple things with the superintendent. You said he starts July 1st effectively, but he's already preparing, doing some work. He's in touch with you guys. And I know you heard that the former vice president of the board and still Commissioner Beatrice LeBrun told us a month ago that she didn't even want to participate in the hiring process. She did not want to attend those meetings because she felt like the district was too distracted. That had the election gone differently in November, she might have felt differently, but she said she's read Project 2025. She thinks the district should be exclusively focused on that. She thinks the district had an interim superintendent who would have been a suitable permanent superintendent. And obviously you disagree, that boards can disagree. But tell me a little bit about your feeling about whether this district and whether this board is responding appropriately to the issues related to, as she says, Project 2025.
Yeah. What I would say is that I think it's important that people do their due diligence. I love that she read up on Project 2025. We know it was written, I believe, in 2022, and that there was a viable understanding that this could become a reality when Trump ran for office back in 2024. We knew he was running. We knew he was coming. I wasn't the leadership of the district at that time. And so I don't remember hearing too much about, what the plans were coming in. And I haven't heard too much around what we're doing right now. What I can say is there is an impending threat on districts across the nation. DEI is under threat, special education, free and reduced meals, students who are learners of other languages, So we have a lot in front of us. There's programs that are potentially going to impact teacher education, professional learning and development. So there's a lot at stake right now with the threat of the Department of Education being closed. Even if we know it takes an act of Congress, even if it doesn't close, they're laying people off, so that impacts services. Will there be contingency plans set in place? Those are questions that are being asked. What are our contingency plans? How can we look at these dollars? How are we preparing our school district to do less with less? And so those are the areas that you have to explore. There have been partnerships or conversations, should I say, with the state education department. We've had regents come in. There's some calls taking place tonight. There's people that are doing legal junctions and signing on the lawsuits. So there's a bunch of stuff happening. How do you consolidate that and create a plan of action around what I would quite frankly refer to as chaos? And how do you do that in a responsible way? Again, it's important to move with a sense of urgency, acknowledge the urgency behind some things, but you cannot incite anxiety across an entire district.
Do you think that the district, do you think the board is doing enough right now about this?
I think we definitely need to do more. And as we gain additional information, we can then have a plan. And so those are conversations that are happening. Those are conversations that are happening.
Do you think the board was distracted by the hiring process of a new superintendent?
No, not at all.
Okay. Now, when it comes to how students are doing every day, are there still today a number of students who are absent consistently because they are scared to be in school given the climate?
Yeah, I think we definitely have a chronic absenteeism issue. And then when you consider, there's a bunch of variables that go into that. But I would say I would be remiss not to acknowledge that there are some students that may be certainly afraid or concerned about what they're hearing out in the public and things of that nature. So I do know that our interim superintendent Strickland several months ago put a plan in place that was communicated to staff within the school buildings and things of that nature. So people are being impacted in our community, in our schools, in our nation. And so we have to have those plans in place and make sure that we're following through with them.
Yeah, certainly there's been an issue with absenteeism before this last election, before ICE became, more of a presence and a threat, perhaps. But do you have a sense for how many students in the district are choosing not to go to class because of a fear of ICE?
No, I don't.
Is it a big number?
I don't have that number, and I can connect with the superintendent, but that would be, something we would have to. That's
think it's
subjective. We have a lot of students who would potentially be impacted by that, but I would be irresponsible to message that as fact if I have not validated that information.
What should the communication be to those families and to those students then who are scared?
Yeah. So the communication that's gone out, the communication that was received by the superintendent, the interim superintendent, and so we definitely want to ensure that our students are protected, that they feel safe, and that we have measures in place to support them. Telling them and showing them are two different things. And, ongoing, do we have the lines of communication where they can reach out and get an understanding? And those things have been communicated at the building level. So there are actions put in place.
And one of the questions that I've heard a lot from listeners in the last 3-4 months is, can ICE go into the classroom? Can they show up at the school building and go inside and pull people out?
They should not be able to, but as we know with these federal threats, that things are changing day in and day out. We also recognize that we're dealing with an administration that doesn't always follow the rules. And so you can have something legally in place, but people can, we got people getting deported that are
You're not supposed to be deported.
They're not supposed to be deported, right?
Yeah.
So anything is up. And so how do you plan for that? And I'd love folks that are really leaned in on this to provide some solutions that maybe they're thinking of. I haven't heard those yet, but I would love to hear that as well, because even being at the National School Board Conference, I wanted to talk to other school communities. What are we doing? What are we hearing? Hearing from folks from the state level. What are you hearing from other districts? What do you suppose we do or propose we do? And legal junctions and things like that, that's great. Suing, things like that can happen. Those things take a lot of money. They take a lot of time. What are the action plans we can put in place right now? And it's this constant change of what's going to happen next. So that's hard to plan for.
Yeah, makes it a hard job, I imagine. Well, and this is a board over time that hasn't always been cohesive. I know you've said that right now you feel like the board is going to work effectively and productively. You're very confident in the hire that the board just made of superintendent. You feel good about the future. We do right now see one board member, James Patterson, petitioning New York State to remove another board member, Isaiah Santiago. They've had plenty of beef. And is there anything that you can relay? I don't know what you can say publicly about that. I know there's ongoing matters happening there. But Can that get resolved? Can this still be a productive and healthy board? Can they be on the board together still, in your view?
For a board to be productive, there has to be a commitment on everyone's end. And what I will say, and I can't speak to things that I have like potentially legal litigation taking place of things of that nature, and I want to respect that process as it is. But I will say that boards require to be highly effective vision. We have to be really laser focused on policy, because policy can either help or hinder a school district, right? And the students and the outcomes. Accountability, which is something I think we lack seriously on our board, and community leadership. And then we have to consider governance. And when those elements are missing, you get what you get, right? So as far as where our board is, again, I would be not telling the truth if I said, yeah, we're a highly functional and effective board. I think that the culture of the board must change. You can put Superman in the superintendent's seat and he will not be successful if the board culture does not change. And when you consider this board culture and the headlines that have happened, and I'm not talking about even recent, I'm talking back, you can go back decades, literally decades, on the dysfunction that has existed.
Yeah.
It's not okay. It's not okay. And at some point, ego has to go out the door and the focus has to be on children. You are a viable hypocrite if you sit there and say you care about kids' education and learning and cannot check your ego at the door. Now, I'm not saying put up with just anything, but it requires us to really fall back from self and lean in towards kids. And I don't know historically if that's happened in this district.
So one other extension on that point, and it's about culture. And I read a lot about leadership. That's a lot of the work that you do is on leadership, as
Love
we know.
it.
As
Yeah.
we know. And I know you think a lot about culture. One of the things you just said was this is a board that has not historically shown a lot of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
That it's got issues with ego and a lack of focus on students. And you said if there's Superman in the superintendent seat, but the culture is poisonous, Superman might not even succeed. And this is, I think, such an important point, because you can have the greatest innovator in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but if the culture is terrible, things are not going to work.
Yeah.
And so what do you do then? Is there anything that you can describe to the community that you are trying to bring to this role as president of the board that says, I can't fix everything, but here's how we're going to try to address culture. Here's what accountability would look like.
Mm-hmm.
What's the answer there?
Yeah. You got to try to drive board culture. And what does that look like? That's not going to be easy with this board. Now, I will say this. I was refreshed. I don't know if I should feel refreshed, but while I was down at the school board conference, to hear some of the stories and other things that happen on boards, I was like, okay, Rochester's not alone, right? We're not an anomaly. And I'm not happy about that, but I'm
There's some comfort.
happy to know, right? Misery loves company. No, I am happy to know that that we're not alone, and boards struggle. And you have to drive in systems of accountability. And I think we've created ourselves as a great case study for how do you do that in a way where you cannot control other people. And I'm not interested in that. And in no shape or form can you go in and say you must stop this. You would hope that people would recognize their own behaviors and say, I need to make some changes. That's not always going to happen. So how do we build in systems of accountability that hold us as board members? That includes myself. This is not to finger point. This is all of us. How do we build in systems of accountability to hold us accountable when we can't act right? Those are things that I'm looking into right now. I'm looking through ways to creatively do that, because it's going to require some level of creativity. But beyond the accountability, you have to move towards board healing. And for some, and there's got to be a willingness. I think there are people that are willing, and I think that is happening in some spaces. and you have to respect those who may not be willing to heal.
Okay.
And then you got to keep moving. That's what you have to keep doing.
In the spirit of this is for everybody, including the president.
Including myself.
What does it look like when you feel like you get home at the end of a long day and you go, I think I lost the plot a little bit there. I kind of, like, what is happening with you when you feel like you yourself are not exhibiting what you want to exhibit?
Well, I think it's a self-assessment. I can't tell other people to do something that I'm not willing to do. Right. So when I talk about dying to self or checking your ego, I have to actively be checking mine. So if there's a criticism in my leadership or things that people feel I may or may not be doing, I cannot allow ego. I'm insulted by that. I'm trying really hard, and that's my response. That's childlike, in my opinion. In the space of leadership, you have to take those things that you may think are credible or not credible and assess yourself and say, is there something? You asked me a great question. Are we doing everything we can do? And I have to say, I think we can do more. I think we can do more, and we have to figure out what that more looks like. Right? And there are conversations that are happening, and I'm not talking about conversations just with another person and no one else knows about them. It's conversations of building and creating a plan to put in front of people. But you want to be careful about how you go about doing that. And that's all I can say there, if that makes sense. But I have to be willing to take the criticism if I believe it's viable or not. And I have to be willing to self-reflect. Sometimes I will even seek out the opinion of someone else. What do you think I can do differently? They might tell me something I don't want to hear. But that's the humility that comes with leadership. That's the humility that allows you to begin to grow and to do better. And that's what our district deserves. So when I'm sitting in this space, I can't worry about how somebody else chooses to act. I can only really look at me. And I have to think about our families, our children, our educators, people that come in to this district every day. What do they deserve to see when they see me? And I try to give them that, as imperfect as it may be. And all I could do is try to get better.
You've got a public-facing job. This microphone is a public-facing job. People will let you know when they're not happy.
They let me know.
They let me know. They let me know. And sometimes it's the best thing for me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a really sharp criticism can really help you see something differently.
Absolutely.
If you're willing to hear it. We're talking to Camille Simmons, the president of the Rochester City School Board. We have to take our only break of the hour. We're going to welcome your feedback on the other side. If you want to join the conversation, it's 844-295-TALK, 844-295-8255, 263-WXXI if you're in Rochester, 263-9994. Email the program, connections@WXXI.org. Join the chat on the WXXI News YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, we are right back with the president of the board on Connection.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from United Way of Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes, serving the community for more than 100 years. Dedicated to creating a future where everyone's basic needs are met so all can thrive. More at unitedwayrocflx.org.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Karen in Rochester on the line first. Karen, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking my call. First, I want to thank the commissioner for her transparency about the condition and state of the school board. I think most of us have observed that for some time. One of the things that I think in terms of accountability is that we don't always think so much about the public's responsibility and accountability because the public elects the school board. And in many cases, we don't always have access to information about who the candidates are, what their positions are, what they're planning on doing. We see their names on the ballot, and often people just vote for the names that they recognize. If you had the same board members, which we have for decades, you just keep voting for the same people. And those people have been doing exactly the same thing that we've seen in our schools. And it has reflected poorly not only against our children who are supposedly being educated, but ultimately towards our society because they have to leave the school district and go into the workforce or not. And I think a lot of that responsibility has to come from individuals who don't really understand nor are really capable of effectively electing people who are going to work to the public good. So that's sort of my comment on that.
Karen, thank you very much. Commissioner Simmons, what do you think?
Oh, I love that. I love what she just shared. I have been actively thinking about the fact that the culture of the school board has persisted in the way that it has. And she's right. We have to do a better job of educating our public on civic engagement and what that looks like, understanding how to research candidates so that you pick viable candidates. Some folks are like, oh yeah, she represents us because I may represent a certain population. I'm like, check me out and make sure you know what my talking points are. You know what I stand for. You know who I am. Learn about me before you decide about me just based on some outward facing characteristics. She's right, because ultimately our public elects who sits in these seats.
Karen, I also just want to say, a little plug for what we do, but I share your concern that people often don't know a lot about who is on the ballot, especially in local races. That is why we at Connections and WXXI, WEOS, and all of our partners, we are committed to making sure you hear people at length before you vote. You really should. This is maybe one of the last platforms in public squares to do it, and we're going to keep doing that for you. So thank you for the phone call, Karen. 844-295-TALK. Back to your feedback in a second. A couple other things I want to make sure we talk about. WXXI News reports, and our colleagues have reported that last year, under then Superintendent Carmine Peluso, the projected budget gap was $14 million. This year it is $38 million, although, again, some of those numbers are a little malleable, but regardless, looks like there has been a gap. What has the budgeting process been like? Are you concerned about that?
Yeah, I'm certainly concerned. We had our first budget deliberations this past a couple of days ago, actually. So we're currently in deliberations, and what we've been presented with is what has been described as a balanced budget. Some of that was in consideration to state foundation aid that was anticipated, may have gone down a bit. And also what you're seeing regarding these gaps, people are saying, how do you get $1 billion budget and end up with a gap? What happens there? And we have to consider healthcare costs and all of these other costs that are sustained within school systems. But we also have to take a look at decisions that have not been made over a number of years. We have a decline in enrollment. Decisions have not been made around how to right-size the district in a responsible way. We have to take a look at central office. We have to take a look at duplication. We have to look at longstanding contracts. What are the decisions that need to be made that may be difficult, that have kind of been kicked down the road, if you will, and you find yourself ending up in these spaces. So those are the conversations we're entering into right now.
What is something that has been on the table to cut? Are there things that you say we can't cut this, and there's proposals to make changes? Are you worried about possible cuts that would do damage?
We want to see, I think anyone wants to see cuts that may need to happen to be as far away from the classroom as possible, right? Because the ultimate responsibility of the school system is to educate children. So we want to ensure that the cuts are healthy and done responsibly. We have to take a look at central office bloating and things of that nature. And so we are exploring those pieces and waiting to hear back from administration on what those potential cuts could look like.
Okay. So that's a story we'll be following. And my colleague Noelle Evans also recently reported on an incident that involved the allegation of peer-to-peer assault, the reporting procedures, and how the district handles this kind of incident. First of all, were you or other board members briefed about that incident, or did you have any communication with the district ahead of WXXI publishing that story?
I was made aware of it, and so the conversation becomes what do we have in place? What's happening under interim superintendent Demario Strickland? One of the things that he actively worked was ensuring that we had centralized systems in place. This would to ensure the adequate reporting, and it was also connected to the student repository system, which connects directly to the state. So those are things that he's been making sure are driven in the right way. And it really becomes a matter of continuous improvement. I think when you look at systems, continuous improvement is vital, and you cannot afford to be reactive. And so what are our systems, again, of accountability? What is our crisis response? what do we have in place? And these things really, in my opinion, should be practiced like fire drills.
Well, I mean, part of the reporting that Noel's story showed is a gap in incident reporting in school safety and educational climate. And for example, at SOTA, Noel looked at the SSEC report, and SOTA had reported over a year no incidents of bullying. Does that seem realistic to you, that the reporting is accurate?
I would want to connect with Interim Superintendent Demario Strickland for some updates around those pieces. So I think that driving those systems, making sure things are placed in the centralized system where they need to be. I think it's Power School. All of that stuff should be in there, and that's one thing that he championed and made sure was happening. So,
okay, and one other part here that I think is interesting. Noel's reporting finds on the district website that SOTA has 2 guidance counselors for roughly 1,000 students, when the American School Counselor Association is recommending a minimum of 1 guidance counselor for every 250 students. So SOTA would need to have a minimum of 4. They've got 2. Is that the kind of thing that can be addressed in the budget? Is the budgeting so tight that is not something that can be addressed? What do you think?
I think anything can be addressed in a budget. I think it's not about having the money. We clearly know money is not necessarily always the issue. It's about strategy and how you utilize it. And so if there's bloat or duplication that's taking place, how are we then identifying those dollars and spaces that they're needed? How are we resourcing our schools to ensure that they are staffed properly, that they have the curriculum, all the things that they need to be successful? So those are the things that we have to continue to conversate about and get a better understanding around.
The Children's Agenda was on this program last week. They do a lot of work. I know you know that, and they're advocating for mental health support in various ways. And they come on this program. They were going to be on the program anyway, and then a student dies by suicide really rocks the community, and everybody is sort of feeling that. So I want to ask you just a couple of things there. First of all, I mean, how do you think the school community is doing after? I mean, that is a tragedy that rocks any community.
Yeah.
How's RCSD doing after that?
Yeah, doing as well as could be expected, right, Evan? And I think it's what was amazing to see is the wrapping around of support for the school community, for the family, and out of respect for the family, I'm going to recognize that this is an ongoing investigation and legal matter that I can't discuss too much, but I will say that my heart goes out to that family. I cannot imagine. And I went there that day, and to see how the school community has come together, to watch interim superintendent and his folks from his cabinet try to make sure that the resources are there, that students and staff have the resources. I know that the services for the young lady were held this past Saturday. I know folks came there, and so it is an ongoing space that you would not want to see anyone have to go through.
Yeah, and so now I guess part of the question going forward is, what's the right combination of mental health supports? That's something that Commissioner Santiago talked about on this program a month ago, and I know he works a lot on that, and I'm sure the whole board is thinking about that. You can't put one counselor for every student, and I don't think you would want to. I mean, yeah. But what can be done? What does that look like?
Yeah, and then guidance counselor, academic counseling, and things of that nature are quite different than mental health supports and social work and things of that nature. So, and the district has a plethora of different supports. I think the objective is to take a look at what already exists and how are we leveraging supports. Do we have a centralized, coordinated plan for students to access those supports? What can we do better with leveraging those supports? And I'm definitely about having a coordinated crisis response as well. So we are looking at that and unpacking all of the things that we have in our district to ensure folks know where to go, how to access it, that type of thing, yeah.
After the incident, I hope the media always reports really sensitively on this. I think for the most part. I mean, I certainly feel like we did. It is an important story because people have to know that a district and kids are hurting. You also have to be very sensitive in stories with self-harm and suicide. And for a while there, school board members who are elected officials were apparently, some members were telling WXXI that they were told not to speak to the media. Was there like any unofficial gag order in place over this that you're aware of?
No, I wouldn't. I don't believe that was the case. What I believe is that you recognize in highly sensitive spaces where a family has been impacted.
Sure, yeah.
Friends, family, students, a school community, folks sometimes can run ahead, and misinformation can be it can be dangerous, and it can be irresponsible. We don't know all the information, but we have to be sensitive that these things happened, that family members and people were still learning about what was going on. And you want to move very cautiously, sensitively, and responsibly in spaces like this. And why would you want to run straight to the media? I do believe the public has the right to know what's going on. But you want to be very cautious in that time. So I wouldn't say, gag order, you can't speak to anyone. It's a matter of let's handle this responsibly.
Yeah, I think I understand that. Let me get Charlie's email. Charlie says, Evan and Camille, I've taught for 33 years, the last 31 in the city. I cannot agree more about changing the culture of the board. Superman as superintendent. Ha! I would ask the new superintendent and all the board members to please listen to people away from board meetings. Listen to kids alone, away from any adults. Listen to parents. Listen to members of the community. Listen to your administrators, albeit with a grain of salt. And also listen to your teachers away from their immediate supervisors. And you will, I promise, learn more about what needs to be done. Good luck. Our kids' future depends on it. He says, P.S. Charlie, he says, P.S. The phones must be put away. They are stealing their owner's education. So he wants to endorse that part.
Gotcha.
But part of what he's saying is try to get the best kind of accountable feedback that you can get away from spheres of influence where someone might not be able to give you their full opinion on something. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I try to practice within reason without getting too far into some things. One piece that I'm excited about is that we have partnered with the Council for Great City Schools. They're helping us with our school board governance, student outcomes focused framework and all that good stuff. And one of the pieces that they're helping us develop is engaging with the community. It's not so much what the gentleman just spoke to because it's a community conversation. So there are spaces where people do need to feel safe to say, hey, this is something I'm struggling with and what have you. So how do you balance out receiving that feedback and supporting folks in the right way?
Charlie, thank you for that. And Charlie, we're going to talk about the proposal from Governor Hochul on a bell-to-bell cell phone ban in schools. We'll be talking about that very soon on this program. It's probably going to involve a series of conversations. I really want to talk to teachers and students and parents and administrators, stakeholders across communities. We want to talk to child psychologists. I mean, we're going to try to bring in a lot of people because it's a big proposal and a lot of states are moving in this direction. And it's not really partisan. I mean, you see it in Illinois, Democratic Governor Pritzker. You see it in Arkansas with a Republican governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And so we'll be talking about that, I promise, soon, Charlie, on this program. Greg wants to know, Greg says, is it true that a school board commissioner was targeted for his age? So Greg is talking about the dispute among commissioners that we referenced earlier. Mm-hmm. Commissioner Isaiah Santiago was elected at the age of 19, I think, when he was elected, the youngest board member ever in Rochester. Mm-hmm. And of course, he had recently been a student himself, brought that very close to the student's perspective. And he has said that he feels he was targeted by a commissioner for his age, that he was treated differently for it. And Greg just wants to know if that is true. I don't know if that's been established fact. I don't even know if you can talk about it, but I'll let you answer Greg's question.
And I wish I could expound on those questions. I think they're good questions. But the reality is right now, as they are going through their litigation or what have you, I am unable to really respond to that. But I do appreciate the question. I do think that school boards to be effective, have to comprise of a multitude of different skills and perspectives. And I think that's what drives the health of a school board. So you may have an expertise or experience around leadership. You may have someone else who understands curriculum and teaching and learning, someone with a legal background, and someone with a youth perspective. So I think those things are always a very healthy balance to have when you're considering systems.
Okay, Greg, thank you for that. A couple other things before we go this hour. You had mentioned earlier, you'd pointed out accurately that the federal government, at least the leadership now, is talking about eliminating the Department of Education. Mm-hmm. And also noted that that's supposed to be an act of Congress, although who knows who has the power anymore, Commissioner, in Washington.
Right.
So if this is a prerogative of the current White House, if they want this to happen, and they've got Republican support in Congress, they might very well be able to do it. So I don't know what that would mean overnight. I don't know if the headline tomorrow is Department of Education eliminated, what that means in principle, in practice right away. Mm-hmm. What comes to mind for you? What are you worried about?
Yeah, it's really having a plan of action. How will the school district be able to survive? When you look at, I'll just focus in on special education. If that were to be interrupted, what does that mean for things that are expected? There's reporting that's supposed to happen with special education. I think they were talking about putting it under the health administration or something of that nature. But there's a very huge education component that needs to be upheld in regard to student learning and special education. What does that look like? So we have to be thinking about, if that were to be interrupted, what are the contingency plans? And those are conversations and questions that I'm continuing to ask. We would like to see some form of a plan A, B, maybe even a C. How are dollars? Can you put dollars in a drudge fund? Right? How do we allocate our dollars responsibly? Or what does that really look like without getting into too much?
Well, does the district have a rainy day fund?
We have a healthy fund balance, I'll tell you that. We have some flexibility, and so we want, obviously, legally, how can we move these dollars around in a way that would allow us to sustain them? Because districts, the initial anticipation is that you wouldn't see them hit this particular year. But in year 2 and 3, you're going to be looking at some really crazy things that you're going to have to navigate. And so how are we putting plans in place to navigate those spaces?
Okay. Yeah, and that's another one, listeners. We'll keep our eyes on the Department of Education and cover that as it goes forward there. And finally, when it comes to the new superintendent, feel free to send a message, as we will continue to send messages, that when he's here, we'd love to sit down with him. I'm sure we will. I'm sure that'll be a regular thing. It always is with superintendents here. And I know he'll be busy. Mm-hmm. One of the things that was mentioned a month ago by your colleagues who did not vote for the new superintendent was they felt like in a crisis, which they feel like we are in, that it's hard to bring in someone who is not from the district to learn it fresh, to start fresh and not have a basis, not have a foundation. A 90-day listening tour is sort of a classic idea of new leaders and new spaces, and they were questioning whether there's even time for that. Are you concerned that the next superintendent will have a big learning curve at a time of crisis when you need leadership that has institutional knowledge?
Yeah. He's well-equipped. He's well-equipped. He's ready for the charge. If I didn't feel that he was, I wouldn't have voted for him to come. I'm confident, I'm excited, and at this point in time, he'll be here July 1st as his official start date. He's already transitioning, and that's something to be said about experience. You know where to look. You know how to move, and the reality is, even sitting superintendents in other districts are, in this crisis time, trying to figure it out.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the reality.
So let's wrap with this then. This is a district that's seen a ton of turnover.
Unfortunately.
And I just don't even think I have it in me to keep asking, do you think this is the one that's going to stay? Because everyone always says yes.
What I'm going to tell you is I have all the confidence in Dr. Eric J. Rosser, and I know he's going to come here and do his thing. But like I told you earlier, Evan, if this board does not get themselves together, Superman himself could not come here and be effective. It's going to really, truly depend on us. And if we all collectively say we care about students and families, even if we didn't select him, then we need to lean in and make sure that we do what we need to do to ensure he's successful in helping our students and families. And you'll know if you're serious about that by the actions of the board. That's it.
And in 30 seconds, what about the rest of the community? What do you want to make sure that they hear to try to lay the groundwork for a superintendent position that will not be turned over again in a year or two?
We need the community. The community voice is powerful. The parent voice is powerful beyond measure. We have parent groups, but we need the collective community parent voice. I'll be doing a community conversation this Saturday for a couple hours at First Genesis. There's some stuff going out there. First Genesis between 2 and 4.
This Saturday,
April 12th, I'll be doing a community conversation.
What time?
At 2 o'clock p.m. from 2 to 4 at First Genesis Baptist Church. Come out and have some conversation. Charlie said we need to hear from folks. Come and holler at me. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Saturday, 2 o'clock, you can meet and talk to the president of the Rochester City School Board as you continue your work, and your colleagues will continue to be welcome here. I want to thank you for being here, and I always look forward to the next conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
The president of the Rochester City School Board, Camille Simmons, as part of our series of conversations with the board. We've got more connections coming up in just a moment.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.